Welcome to another episode of the Bank Free Blueprint Podcast. And today I have with me Lane Kawaoka. Welcome, Lane.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tom.
Absolutely. So today we're going to talk about the path that one might take as an investor, either to get involved in rental property, it might be single family, might be small apartments, and so getting started in rental, and also getting to the point where maybe if our listeners have one or two rentals, how to expand and even get it to the point where eventually they can grow the portfolio to the point where they have enough cash flow to be able to quit their job. How does that sound?
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So, Lane, I know you and I spoke a little bit before this recording, and I know that you've got some quite a bit of experience in this. You have what, over 1,000 units right now, and you've been doing this since 2009. Your background, you are a civil engineer, and you basically do syndications and investing, which is exactly what we are looking to talk about. So thank you, Lane, for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Hopefully we can show people how to get from the doing it yourself to kind of going bigger and, diversifying too.
Yeah. So in real estate investing, I always look at it, there's an investing spectrum. There's sort of the active side of the spectrum and the passive side. And some of our listeners are on the active side where they have more time than money and looking to get more deals, maybe get more deals funded, get more rental properties, or get started in rental properties, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where investors have money and they don't have a lot of time. And so working together to get the two to team up and get into rental properties, that really is a goal for a lot of people, I believe. And so when you got started, how were you able to get started on your first rental property or properties? Because I think if we walk through that, then our listeners will be able to tell how they might be able to do it as well.
Yeah, so I started back in 2009, fresh out of college, started my construction supervisor job, and I had not very much time. I had some money, but I didn't know anything. And those are the three resources I always break it down to. Whenever I talk to somebody fresh, time, money, and knowledge, how are those resources? If you tell me you don't have much time, you don't have much money, you don't know anything, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Mm-hmm.
But, I had some money. So in a few years, I was able to save up for a single family home to live in. Still living that linear path of, just follow what everybody tells you to do. But then I started to rent that thing out, and I was like, wow, making some pretty good cash flow. And I was like, wow, this is my way out of the rat race, right? So I got focused, and I got to buy more of these things. And that's how things got started.
I see. And was that in Honolulu as well? You're in Honolulu, Hawaii right now, right?
Yeah. So I grew up in Hawaii, but I went to University of Washington for college, and that's kind of where I started buying the first couple of rental properties. But 2012 came around, and I was going to buy another property. But as we all know, Seattle is a primary market, much like San Francisco, Hawaii, New York. A lot of these cool places to live have a lot of people with unsophisticated money and a lot of competition there. So you can't hit your rent to value ratios. So I did 1031 where I exchanged my two Seattle properties for 9 out of state in Birmingham, Atlanta, Indianapolis. And that was kind of how my foray into out of state remote investing from there.
So you were able to trade up in to a larger portfolio with what you had.
Right. I was lucky for a few years holding those properties that I got a lot of appreciation, but I always see the big grand scheme of things is try and get the cash flow up first. Maybe a few $1,000s so you can put food on the table, both mentally and literally. But that allows you to go after bigger and seemingly more riskier investments from there.
Mm-hmm. I see. And You mentioned a few different markets. What do you have any particular favorite markets right now, or markets that you think are up and coming, or what markets would you say for a beginner might be good, or maybe maybe your strategy, what you use, maybe it isn't quite as market sensitive.
Yeah, I think when you're starting out, I think it's sort of important to pick a good market with good, you know, they have a team there. I would go after secondary markets, or some people call them second tier markets that are, you know, large cities and with robust economies. So, you know, like Detroit, I would say is a secondary market, but it doesn't really have a robust economy there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, you want good job drivers. I would say a lot of the Sun Belt has a lot of that today. You know, if you draw a smiley face on the United States, from Phoenix to New Mexico to Texas to the Carolinas to Georgia, you know, I mean, you really can't go wrong down there because that's just where all the jobs are going. A lot of people are moving to the southern hemisphere of the United States. But you know, these days, you know, I think once you get to be a little more experienced investor, you're looking for those undervalued, undermarket, sort of distressed properties, whether it be apartments or single family homes, and that really can pop up anywhere.
And is that because you're able to maybe get the property improved a little bit and get the rents up a bit more? Is that the strategy that you use, is maybe get something that's a little bit undervalued?
Right. So it has to be kind of a perfect storm of a few things. So the current rents should be under market. So that's, you know, you just buy the property, you just put in new management, and then boom, you've already bumped the rents by $50 already. And then, like you said, you know, put in some rehab. You know, usually we're putting anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 of rehab into the properties. Nothing's that high or that crazy in terms of rehab. But you know, again, it's not lipstick on a pig. It's
Mm-hmm.
substantial rehab.
Mm-hmm.
And with those two components, you know, buying in a good market, hopefully that third one can come in, and that trade win can really take you to a good gain. But you know, those first two are important. That in case there's ever a correction, that at least you're not underwater. At least
Mm-hmm.
you're able to hold on to that property with the loan you've got.
And with, you just mentioned if something happens with the market again, then that's a nice thing about rental property, is that it's not quite as sensitive to a downturn in real estate if that happens, because people really always do need a place to live. So
Right. I mean, in theory, the demand for the rental property, especially if you're working in the BC class, goes up.
mm-hmm. Right. You mentioned something just a little bit earlier about rent to value ratio. Could you describe that, explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that's so as a beginning investor, that's really the first thing that I think you should look at when you're analyzing properties. So the rent to value ratio is you take the monthly rent, you divide it by the purchase price. So $100,000 property that rents for $1,000, you know, you put into your calculator 1,000 divided by 100,000, and that equals 1%.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually the bare minimum you need to be able to cash flow, income minus expenses and capital expenditures and vacancy. It's a good starting point. And I think if you're a beginning investor, you know, just take a look at the properties around you that you're looking, and that's pretty much a quick and dirty way of seeing if it's going to work for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, use Rent-A-Meter, use Craigslist, use Facebook Marketplace these days is actually probably better than Craigslist, I think, in determining the rental amount.
Facebook Marketplace, I haven't used that, so okay. And you also mentioned earlier that if you can get a property to have an increase in rent, and I think you used the amount $50 a unit, how is there a quick and dirty way to sort of translate that into a value increase in the property?
Yeah, so with multifamily, there's the whole NOI calculation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where you take the bump in rents or the increase to NOI divided by that cap rate, and that's sort of the magical how much value you've created. just by making that one change. Single family is a little bit tougher. You're going by the comps approach, and you're kind of at the will of what's happening in the market, which can hurt you and which can also help you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think anytime you're bumping the rents up $50, that's usually anywhere from 5 to 10% on all these rental properties. If it's renting from $500 to $1,000, that's usually going to mean, a $50 bump in rent. That's usually going to mean at least a $5,000 increase
Mm-hmm.
to that purchase price, especially if, when you're talking rental value ratios, that 1% rule usually holds pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at properties, or I'll ask it this way: advantages and disadvantages between single family rentals and multi-unit. And let's use maybe 8-plex or 12-plex rental unit versus a single family. What are the pros and cons of each of those?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of people, they do the pro and con matrix. They go out and Google this stuff, and by far multifamily is better than single family, by far. But I think single family gives you the prerequisite to go after, to just get started. And I think that, single family, the numbers are smaller. You can get in quicker. But just using my story, I got up to 10 single family homes. I got Fannie Mae out, Freddie Mac out, where I couldn't get any of those government sponsored loans.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was doing, just do the math, right? At a few $100s of cash flow per property, that's only $3,000 of passive a month.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not complaining or anything, but that's not enough to live on.
Mm-hmm.
That's not financial freedom that I read I was going to get in the books. And with my 10 single family homes, I was getting 1 or 2 evictions a year, probably about 4 big events that happened every year too. And you just do the math. If you need 30 of these properties, you're going to have an eviction every month. You're going to have a dozen big events happening on one every month. I mean, it's just not scalable
Mm-hmm.
at some point.
Sure.
So at some point, you've got to step up to the bigger and better stuff. But I went straight to the larger properties where I could take advantage of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac non-recourse debt.
I see. So for our listeners, someone who would like to get into that 8-plex or 12-plex instead of another single family rental, what sort of advice would you give them? How would they make that transition?
Yeah, so I was sort of looking at the, that route from going the 4-plex to the 8-plex, the 16 to the 32. I call that the mom and pop investor route.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, a lot of times I deter people from going down that route because usually you're putting all your money into it. You're putting a few $100,000 of all your money into it, which is a big risk in one property. And the biggest thing is that you're going after the worst lending. I mean, $1 million loan to down is probably no man's land for multifamily. Mm-hmm. You're getting these recourse debt, which means, recourse is when you buy a primary residence or these single family homes. If something ever happens, you're liable you lose the down payment, and the bank comes after you for everything else that you
personally
borrow.
liable, right?
But these non-recourse loans, you just lose your down payment and you sort of just walk away, assuming that there's no foul play involved.
And is that the type of thing that you work with, where you do syndications, you work with people and actually help put syndications together, or are you just a participant in the syndication? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And syndication, maybe just describe what syndication is, pulling people together.
Yeah, so I put together syndications. The analogy I like to use for syndications is an airplane. So in the airplane, you have the cockpit, which has all the general partners or the syndicators or leads. And those individuals, they do everything. They find the good deal via their strong networks. They vet the deal, they put it under contract, they find the lenders, they find the investors. And the limited partners come into coach and they sit down. They usually pay about $25,000, $50,000 minimum to get a seat in the coach. And they sit down, they shut up, and they they cash their checks, and everybody's flying in the same airplane. A lot of the goals and the way the contracts are written and are everybody's incentivized to do the role.
So it can really be a passive way of getting into multifamily and not require a lot of time and effort because, as you say, they're sitting in coach and going along for the ride.
Right. The problem is now instead of analyzing the property or the market, it becomes more analyzing the deal sponsor.
The pilot.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, you're looking for a good character and track record at that point.
Mm-hmm. And let's just go down that path a little bit. What are some of the things, character, track record? How does one find out about those types of things? What would you recommend for somebody who's looking to maybe team up with somebody who's doing syndications? What are a couple of the key points to look for?
Yeah, so what I would do is, just ask around who are the people doing the bigger projects, and just start, Bigger Pockets is an okay one to find. I don't know if they're ever good on there. Everybody looks the same. Everybody has a nice profile picture with a suit on and a flashy website and a flashy PDF.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty ubiquitous. But what I do is I join a lot of masterminds. I go to a lot of seminars and spend a lot of money doing this. And what that gets me is a network of relationships. And from there, I'm able to build my network of my web. And I mean, when a deal does come up and I see this executive summary, I scroll right down to who's the leads on this. And I can usually find somebody in my network who has been in their previous deal or knows them pretty intimately.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my competitive advantage.
I see. And you mentioned the word mastermind. I'm assuming that's a group of maybe anywhere from 6 to 15, or, it could even be more people that get together that have like-minded, sort of like they have similar goals, similar aspirations, and they can help each other grow and collaborate and get to where they want to go. Is that correct?
Right. I'm in a couple of them. I'm in an apartment mentoring group and then also a syndication mentoring group.
Okay. Got it. So
it also helps making a podcast too, Tom. You
right,
a lot of
right.
people.
Yeah, and I didn't mention that at the beginning. You have your podcast, which is Simple Passive Cash Flow podcast, and you've been doing that for quite a while now.
Yeah, a couple of years, and I think I started it, and I didn't realize it does create a lot of value. I mean, I want to be, we met, and before we didn't know each other, and we get to know each other now. But in the beginning, it's like, well, I want to be on your podcast. You want to be on my podcast. That's
right.
How it kind of begins. But it just initiates relationships, and now your people. Now my people. Now I know your people now.
Right. And it's a great way to make connections, but it's also a great way to sort of give back and help other people learn things that maybe you and I have learned the hard way, or that we've experienced, and so it's kind of fun being able to help other people grow as well.
Exactly.
So what do you see as your next, let's say in the next 5 years, what's 5 years from now going to look like for you? What are you aiming for? What's your target? What are your goals and aspirations?
Well, I think I kind of started this about a year ago, where I started an online investor club, and I'm always looking to invest my own money. And meeting all these people, and I was like, well, let me just make this list, and I might as well tell people what I'm investing in. So that's how it kind of started to create this band of investors that all kind of help each other out, source due diligence together, source deals together, and move that forward. And recently I moved back home to Honolulu, Hawaii, and it's pretty expensive here. And one of the reasons was to help a lot of local people here, because not very many people invest in these syndications, or even invest in a single family home. to kind of help people locally was kind of what I started, and to kind of build my platform out locally here.
I see. I see. Nice. Yeah. So what would you say to investors? Um, what advice would you give to an investor that's starting out? What would be their first step to getting into the rental units that they're looking for?
Yeah, I would say I would first, self-awareness is the first step. So we talked about the time, money, and knowledge / network.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what you have of those. If you don't have any money, but you got time, I'm sorry, you can't invest in real estate. I'm sorry. You need money to invest in real estate. If not, you got a money problem, and you're going to have to make money via job, selling stuff on eBay, or wholesaling homes, or helping a flipper. I'm sorry, that's just what you're going to have to do. I mean, you may have an awesome network and you can play connector, but that's what most people are going to have to do. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have a lot of money, now hook up with other people that are more experienced and just kind of ride on the coattails of others, or get started on this path yourself and just buy a single family home and get started.
Mm-hmm. I see.
But from a lot of people it's a wide range of spectrum. And, I've developed a $30,000 rule where if somebody is able to save more than $30,000 at the end of their paycheck and investments after expenses a year, they should probably step up to private placements and syndications as soon as possible. But I still say a lot of them should start with a single family home, because it is kind of the prerequisite to build that knowledge base.
Yeah, to get the experience and really understand what to look for when
Right.
investing in rental properties.
Right. I mean, I started out as a young engineer, and I didn't make that much money. So that's why I had to do what I did and buy these
Mm-hmm.
single family homes and grind my way out of that $30,000 threshold.
Mm-hmm. I see. What resources, what's your favorite resource or book that helped you out that you might recommend for our listeners?
I think Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller has a lot of the good fundamentals in there. But, I really deter people from reading books. I'm like, just go out and do it. So there's that 70-20-10 rules. 10% is the academics, the reading the
Mm-hmm.
books. 20% is learning from others. That's why networking with a lot of people, and, I've kind of built a pretty good Facebook community online where, it's not one of those massive 500 plus people that are pretty useless. That, it's a small group of people that are doing the same thing, trying to get that first single family home. But 70% is just doing it.
So not getting caught up in the needing to know absolutely everything and stalling on getting started. Really get in there, do it, get the work going, and maybe team up with other people who are doing it, because what better way to learn than someone who's already made other mistakes that they can teach you now. So
Right. I think Grant Cardone said it one time, like, I haven't read any books, but I've analyzed like 500 properties in last year.
Who was that?
Grant Cardone.
Oh, right.
And, that's totally right. Stop reading these books and, see what's actually out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. And if someone would like to reach out to you, get a hold of you, I know you're doing a newsletter, you're doing this podcast. How would people reach you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can go to simplepassivecashflow.com, or, check out the podcast and Google Play, local cast players. But if people want to get a hold of me, Lane at simplepassivecashflow.com is my email. Always looking to get on the phone with people and trying to point people in the right direction. It always seems like I can usually figure out in 5 to 10 minutes what's your time and your knowledge and your how much money you have, which way you should head in this. And I think it really helps people get started.
Great. Excellent. Well, this has been good. Thank you, Lane, for the great information. And really just it's a matter of getting out there and doing it, get some cash flow going, build build your portfolio slowly. Maybe start with a smaller property and step your way up. And Lane, I appreciate you sharing everything. And if again, feel free to reach out to Lane for his newsletter and his podcast, Simple Passive Cash Flow. So thank you, Lane, and until next time, appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
You bet.